when single mother Eliza Morgan started removing layers of yellowed wallpaper in her recently purchased 1870s farmhouse in Harpersville, Georgia, for $94,000. A desperate attempt to rebuild her life after her teaching career was derailed by school budget cuts. She never imagined that peeling back the Victorian-era patterns would reveal a hidden alcove containing a cryptic Civil War-era map, unlock the location of a forgotten Confederate treasury worth millions in gold and historical artifacts, expose a network of secret tunnels beneath her property once used by Southern sympathizers, identify her home as a former safe house for Confederate officers on the run, connect her to the mysterious disappearance of the home's original owner shortly after Lee's surrender at Appomattox, and transform her from struggling single parent to the central figure in what historians are now calling one of the most significant Civil War discoveries of the century. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Eliza Morgan turned off the engine of her aging Subaru Outback and stared through the dusty windshield at what would become their new home. The two-story white-clabbered farmhouse with its sagging front porch and overgrown garden looked nothing like the cozy apartment near the elementary school where she had taught third grade for 12 years. But those days were gone, swept away, in a tide of budget cuts, program eliminations, and finally, a pink slip that had upended her carefully constructed life. "Is that it, Mom?" Her 14-year-old daughter, Haley, peered out from behind her worn paperback novel, expression skeptical as she assessed their new beginning. "That's it," Eliza confirmed, injecting optimism into her voice. "It needs some love, but it has potential, plus it's ours, free and clear." The life insurance policy from her late husband, carefully preserved for years and supplemented by her modest savings, had been just enough to purchase this neglected property in the small town of Harpersville after they could no longer afford the rent on their apartment. The house had languished on the market for nearly a decade, its price dropping steadily until it fell within her limited means. The listing had mentioned historical significance and original features, real estate, euphemisms for crumbling plaster and outdated everything. As they made their way up the creaking steps, Eliza mentally calculated the work ahead, reinforcing the porch supports, updating the dangerous knob and tube wiring, replacing the ancient plumbing, and removing what the listing had described as authentic period wall coverings throughout. The inspection had revealed no major structural issues, which seemed miraculous given the property's obvious neglect. The foundation was solid granite. The roof had been replaced just before the previous owner passed away, and the bones of the house remained sturdy, despite its cosmetic challenges. The real estate agent, Mr. Calloway, was waiting on the porch, keys in hand. A 60-ish man with a southern drawl as thick as molasses, he'd been surprisingly transparent about the property's checkered history. "Welcome to Harpersville, ladies," he greeted them with genuine warmth. "Not the best weather for moving day, I'm afraid." The Georgia summer heat was oppressive, the humidity making even the lightest movement an exercise in discomfort. "We travel light these days," Eliza replied, gesturing to her car where a small U-Haul trailer held the remnants of their former life. Inside, the house smelled of dust and disuse. According to Mr. Calloway, the property had been vacant for over 5 years after being inhabited intermittently by a series of short-term renters. The original owner, a man named Colonel Josiah Beaumont, had built the house in 1871, shortly after the Civil War. Curiously, he had disappeared under mysterious circumstances barely a year after completion, leaving behind a fully furnished home and considerable speculation about his fate. "The town has plenty of history," Mr. Calloway explained as he led them through. "Rooms frozen in late 19th century decor, Many of these old houses were built by Confederate veterans trying to rebuild their lives after the war. Harpersville had quite a few prominent Southern families because of the fertile land and the nearby gold mining operations. Eliza nodded politely, more focused on the peeling wallpaper and warped floorboards than the home's history. Her practical teacher's mind could see potential beneath the decay, spacious rooms with high ceilings, large windows that would provide excellent natural light when properly cleaned, and unexpected charming details like ornate crown molding and an original cast-iron fireplace in what would become the living room. "Dibs on this room," Haley called from upstairs, having raced ahead to explore. Her enthusiasm was the first Eliza had seen in months, a welcome change from the sullen resignation that had characterized her daughter's response to their financial downfall and forced relocation. The previous owner left most of the furniture. Mr. Calloway continued. "The estate executor said you're welcome to keep what you can use and dispose of the rest." That was something. At least their hastily packed trailer held clothes, books, and personal items, but little furniture after selling most of their possessions to cover outstanding debts and moving expenses. After Mr. Calloway departed with well wishes and a promise to check in next week, Eliza and Haley began the process of turning the neglected house into their home. The summer heat intensified outside, sunlight streaming through dirty windows and highlighting decades of dust and cobwebs. There was an almost overwhelming quality to the task ahead, but also something oddly liberating about starting completely fresh. "It's like we're urban pioneers," Haley declared, trying to maintain the sense of adventure Eliza had carefully fostered during their downsizing. At 14, she was old enough to understand they had financial problems, but young enough to still find novelty in their changed circumstances. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That night, after getting Haley settled with her laptop and headphones in what would become her bedroom, Eliza sat on the floor of what would serve as her own room, formerly a small parlor on the main floor. The walls were covered in faded Victorian wallpaper, an elaborate pattern of burgundy roses and green vines, peeling at the seams and water-stained in the corners. With a glass of cheap wine balanced on a moving box, she began sketching renovation. Plans by the light of a camping lantern, her teacher's planning skills providing some comfort in the unfamiliar space. The following weeks settled into an exhausting routine. Eliza had found work as a tour guide at the local Historical Society Museum, a far cry from her beloved teaching position, but offering flexible hours that allowed her to work on the house and be there when Haley returned from her new school. Each evening and weekend was devoted to stripping away decades of neglect and poor maintenance. The kitchen came first, a critical upgrade for daily living. The ancient cast-iron sink had to be replaced, along with the dangerously outdated electrical outlets. The bathroom followed, where 19th-century plumbing proved as troublesome as expected. Throughout the process, Eliza documented their progress on a blog, partly as therapy and partly in hopes of eventually monetizing their renovation journey if it gained enough followers. As she immersed herself in the renovation, Eliza began to notice peculiarities about the house that hadn't been obvious at first. The walls in certain areas seemed unnecessarily thick. The basement had curious brick partitions that didn't align with the home's structural needs. Most interestingly, the floorboards in the dining room had unusual wear patterns, suggesting frequent movement along specific paths rather than the general wear expected from normal use. "Mom, come look what I found," Haley called one Saturday morning, 3 weeks into their renovation. Eliza found her daughter in the back of the hallway closet, pointing at a small metal lock plate nearly invisible behind the hanging rod. "What's this for?" Haley asked, tracing the outline of what appeared to be a keyhole cover. Eliza examined it carefully. "Probably an old servant's bell system component," she suggested, though something about its placement seemed odd. Lots of these older homes had bells to summon help from different rooms. "It looks like it could still open," Haley observed, trying to slide the cover aside. "There's a keyhole behind it." "Let me put that on the investigation list," Eliza said, making a mental note to examine it more closely later. The house was full of such mysteries, artifacts of decades of different owners and changing technologies. By the 6th week, with Haley adjusting reasonably well to her school and making at least one new friend in the neighborhood, Eliza finally turned her attention to what would become her bedroom. The room had been used for storage by previous occupants, and she had simply shifted boxes around until now, prioritizing living spaces over her own comfort. "Time to tackle this wallpaper," she muttered to herself one Saturday morning. Armed with a spray bottle of homemade wallpaper remover and a scraper, Haley was at her new friend's house for a swim party, a positive sign of her social adjustment, giving Eliza hours of uninterrupted work time. The floral pattern, once, probably, quite fashionable in post-Civil War Georgia, had aged into a faded, water-damaged eyesore. Beginning in one corner, Eliza sprayed the solution and waited for it to penetrate the paper. As she worked methodically around the room, she noticed something odd about the wall adjacent to the central hallway. The wallpaper pattern didn't quite match in one section, a subtle discrepancy that her detail-oriented teacher's eye couldn't ignore. "Poor installation," she concluded, attacking the mismatched section with particular vigor. But as the paper came away, it revealed not the expected plaster beneath, but a seam in the wall material itself. Curious, Eliza focused on this area, carefully removing more wallpaper around the anomaly. After 30 minutes of methodical work, she stepped back in surprise. Hidden beneath decades of wallpaper was the unmistakable outline of a small door, or panel approximately 2 feet square. Unlike the obvious doorways elsewhere in the house, this opening had been deliberately concealed, its edges carefully disguised beneath layers of wallpaper and paint. "What in the world?" she whispered, running her fingers along the nearly invisible seam. There was no handle or knob, just the clear outline of a square panel and what appeared to be a small keyhole at one edge. Heart racing with unexpected excitement, Eliza worked faster, stripping away the remaining wallpaper covering the hidden panel. When fully revealed, the surface was unmistakably different from the surrounding plaster, wooden rather than textured wall material, painted to match the wall color that must have existed before the wallpaper was applied. "This is no random architectural feature," Eliza murmured, examining the keyhole. "This was deliberately installed and then hidden." Her phone pinged with a text from her neighbor confirming that Haley was having fun and would stay for dinner. Good. This gave Eliza more time to investigate her bizarre discovery. Returning to the kitchen, she retrieved a small toolkit and a flashlight, determined to understand what she had found. Back in the bedroom, she carefully examined the panel frame, looking for any clue about its purpose or how to access whatever lay beyond. The craftsmanship was impressive. No amateur construction here. It had been designed to remain hidden, with the seams perfectly aligned, to be invisible beneath wallpaper or paint. Only the slightly mismatched wallpaper pattern from a later renovation had revealed its existence. On a hunch, Eliza remembered the keyhole plate Haley had discovered in the hallway closet. Could they be connected? Moving quickly to the closet, she re-examined the metal plate, which slid aside more easily now that she knew what to look for. Behind it was indeed a small keyhole, similar in size and shape to the one on the hidden panel. But without a key, how could she access either? Eliza began a methodical search of the areas around both keyholes, looking for any hidden compartment that might contain a key. As she ran her fingers along the closet baseboard, she felt a small irregularity. Pressing, it revealed a hidden compartment containing a tarnished brass key with an ornate design on its head. With nervous anticipation, Eliza tried the key in the closet keyhole first. It fit perfectly, but nothing happened when she turned it. Moving back to the bedroom, she inserted the key into the panel's lock. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a soft click sounded, and the panel released slightly from its frame. Taking a deep breath, Eliza carefully pulled the panel open, revealing not a room as she had half expected, but a small alcove built into the thick wall. The space was approximately 2 feet deep and contained what appeared to be a metal document, box, a leather-bound journal, and a rolled parchment tied with faded ribbon. Cool, dry air wafted out from the space, carrying the unmistakable scent of old paper and metal. "Oh, my God!" Eliza whispered, carefully removing the items and placing them on the floor beside her. This was no ordinary storage space. The document, box alone, appeared to be from the Civil War era, with decorative brass fittings and a small Confederate insignia embossed on its lid. Opening the box first, she found a collection of yellowed letters, official-looking documents with ornate letterheads bearing Confederate government emblems, and several daguerreotype photographs of stern-looking men in military uniforms. Each item was meticulously preserved and organized, suggesting they had been deliberately hidden rather than simply stored. Next, she unrolled the parchment, revealing what was unmistakably a map. Hand-drawn in faded ink, it showed what appeared to be the Harpersville region, with the location of her house clearly marked. Various routes were indicated leading from the property to a location in the nearby mountains, marked with a symbol that resembled a crossed pick and shovel, the universal indication of a mine. Notations in elegant 19th-century handwriting lined the margins, including what appeared to be cipher text and coordinates. Finally, Eliza turned to the journal. The leather cover bore the name Collar Josiah Beaumont in gold lettering, the original owner who had vanished so mysteriously. The first entry was dated May 1871, shortly after the house's completion. The Treasury has been successfully relocated to the secondary site. None but myself and Captain Harrison know of its full contents or exact location. The maps have been divided for security, mine showing the approach route, Harrison's containing the precise chamber markings. Should the Yankees discover our operation, this separation ensures the cause's future shall not be compromised in a single discovery. Eliza's hands trembled as the implications began to dawn on her. She had uncovered what appeared to be documentation of a hidden Confederate treasury, gold, currency, or other valuables secreted away in the chaotic final days of the Civil War, never recovered and lost to history when Colonel Beaumont disappeared. As she continued reading, the journal revealed more details. Beaumont had been part of a small group of Confederate officers tasked with safeguarding a significant portion of the Confederate treasury as the Union Army advanced through Georgia. Rather than surrendering these assets, they had hidden them in an abandoned gold mine, intending to retrieve them once circumstances allowed for a potential resurgence of the Southern cause. The house, her house, had been built specifically to serve as a safe house and coordination point for this operation, with hidden compartments and secret passages designed to conceal both people and documentation during a time when former Confederates remained under suspicion. Another entry caught her eye, dated April 1872, just before Beaumont's recorded disappearance. Harrison grows increasingly unstable. Fears we are watched. Threatens to reveal all if we do not distribute the holdings. He fails to understand the greater purpose for which these resources must be preserved. I have arranged a meeting at the northern site tomorrow to resolve this untenable situation. That was the final entry, Whatever happened at that meeting, Colonel Beaumont had never returned to document it. Had there been foul play? Had Harrison or others eliminated Beaumont to protect the secret? Or had Beaumont himself disappeared with a portion of the treasure, as local legend apparently suggested? The sound of a car door slamming outside jolted Eliza from her historical rabbit hole. Checking the time, she realized with shock that hours had passed as she examined the documents. Haley was being dropped off from her friend's house. Hurriedly, Eliza gathered the materials and placed them back in the alcove, securing the panel before hastily reattaching some of the loose wallpaper to conceal her discovery. She needed time to process this information before sharing it with her teenage daughter. "Mom, you should see their pool. It's amazing," Haley called as she burst through the front door, her enthusiasm a stark contrast to Eliza's internal turmoil. "Diana's parents said I can come over any time to swim." Eliza forced a smile, compartmentalizing her thoughts to focus on her daughter. "That sounds wonderful, honey. Did you have a good time?" As they prepared a simple dinner together, Eliza found herself studying their home with new awareness. The thick walls that had seemed odd now made perfect sense. They had been designed to accommodate hidden compartments and possibly passageways. The unusual wear patterns in the dining room floor might indicate a trapdoor or access point to tunnels below. Even the ornate moldings could potentially conceal access mechanisms or hiding spots for keys. That night, after Haley had retreated to her room to text with her new friends, Eliza returned to her bedroom and sat staring at the wall where the hidden panel lay concealed behind hastily reattached wallpaper. The sensible option would be to simply report her discovery to the Historical Society or perhaps the University Archaeology Department. The academic and historical value was undeniable, but the journal's mentions of a treasury, potentially gold or other valuables worth millions in today's market, complicated her decision. As a struggling single mother with mounting renovation costs and a daughter who would need college tuition in just a few years, the possibility of finding even a portion of a lost Confederate treasury was impossible to ignore. Moreover, if Colonel Beaumont had indeed met with foul play over this secret, might there be descendants of those involved still in the area? People who might not want this information revealed after remaining hidden for 150 years. With trembling hands, Eliza carefully reopened the panel and removed the map and journal. If she was going to make an informed decision, she needed to understand exactly what she had discovered and what it might lead to. Spreading the map on the floor, she began a detailed examination, noting how the routes from her house connected to the nearby mountains approximately 12 miles away. The area marked on the map would now be part of Chattahoochee National Forest, federal land where any historical artifacts would legally belong to the government. But the precise location remained cryptic, with the final approach marked in what appeared to be a substitution cipher rather than clear directions. The journal provided additional context, but no clear key to the cipher. Beaumont had been cautious, knowing the value of what he protected and the potential for betrayal. The separation of the maps, his showing routes and Harrison's showing the exact location, had been a deliberate security measure that now complicated Eliza's understanding. Who was Harrison? Had he disappeared along with Beaumont? Did his portion of the map still exist somewhere, perhaps in another hidden compartment, in her house or in another location entirely? As midnight approached, Eliza reluctantly returned the documents to their hiding place. Tomorrow, she would need to make discreet inquiries about both Beaumont and Harrison without revealing exactly what she had found. The local historical society, where she now worked, might provide resources without raising undue suspicion about her interest in these specific Civil War figures. Sleep proved elusive that night. Her mind raced with possibilities: historical recognition if she reported her find, financial security if she somehow located the Treasury, or potential danger if others became aware of what lay hidden in her walls. By dawn, she had made no firm decision beyond continuing her investigation while maintaining secrecy for the time being. The next morning, Sunday, provided a perfect opportunity. The Historical Society was closed to the public, but open to staff catching up on work. Telling Haley she needed to prepare for upcoming tours, Eliza drove to the small museum housed in Harpersville's former courthouse. The building was quiet, with only the weekend security guard nodding a greeting as she entered with her newly issued staff key card. The research room and archives were on the second floor, accessible only to staff and registered researchers. "Working on a Sunday? That's dedication," commented Dr. Lenore Wilkins, the Society's elderly archivist, who apparently never took a day off. Her perpetual presence was both a complication and potentially a resource. "Just trying to get ahead on my tour research," Eliza explained with a casual smile. "I want to make sure I'm giving visitors accurate information about local families." Dr. Wilkins nodded approvingly. "Any particular families you're focusing on?" Eliza had prepared for this. "I've had several visitors ask about the Beaumonts, since my house was originally theirs, and they seem to have been connected to the Harrison family. I thought I'd research both to add some personal stories to my tours." "Excellent choice," Dr. Wilkins remarked, her eyes lighting up with scholarly enthusiasm. "The Beaumont-Harrison relationship is quite fascinating, from battlefield alliance to mysterious conflict. We have several boxes of materials on both families in section C, shelves 15 through 18. This was more than Eliza had hoped for. Mysterious conflict? That sounds intriguing. Dr. Wilkins lowered her voice conspiratorially, clearly delighted to share historical gossip with a receptive audience. Colonel Josiah Beaumont and Captain Thomas Harrison served together throughout the war, inseparable, according to contemporary accounts. After the surrender, they returned to Harpersville together and remained close associates until their simultaneous disappearance in April 1872. "They both disappeared?" Eliza asked, genuinely surprised. The journal had mentioned Harrison, but not his fate. Indeed, local speculation at the time suggested everything from a duel gone wrong to a secret mission for unrepentant Confederate sympathizers. Dr. Wilkins gestured toward the archives. Their descendants donated family papers over the years, though suspiciously, certain periods have noticeable gaps in the correspondence. Armed with this information, Eliza spent the next several hours poring through boxes of letters, photographs, newspaper clippings, and official documents related to both families. Several key discoveries emerged. First, an 1870 letter from Harrison to his wife mentioned a sacred trust that would secure our future when circumstances allow, supporting the journal's indication of hidden Confederate assets. Second, land. Records showed that Harrison had purchased property adjacent to an abandoned gold mine in the mountains, precisely where the map indicated, ostensibly for timber harvesting, but with minimal logging activity recorded. Third, and most intriguingly, a newspaper article dated May 1872 reported the discovery of 2 horses belonging to Beaumont and Harrison near the mountain property, but no trace of the men themselves. The article noted unusual excavation equipment found nearby, suggesting they had been engaged in some kind of mining or digging operation before their disappearance. As Eliza carefully photographed key documents with her phone, a final item captured her attention: a letter from Harrison's widow to Beaumont's sister dated 1875. "I remain convinced that neither Thomas nor the Colonel met their end by accident or natural cause. Mr. Davidson's sudden prosperity after their disappearance cannot be coincidental, nor can his hasty relocation to Atlanta. Whatever secret they protected, I fear it cost them their lives, and now benefits one who betrayed them both. This introduced a new element, Davidson, apparently someone who might have been involved in whatever happened to Beaumont and Harrison. The letter suggested foul play and a third party who might have benefited from their disappearance. By late afternoon, Eliza had compiled substantial background information while raising minimal suspicion about her specific interest. Thanking Dr. Wilkins for her assistance, she headed home with her mind racing. The historical record supported what she had found in the hidden compartment, but added new complexity to the story. As she drove through Harpersville's quiet Sunday streets, a particular building caught her eye: the Davidson hardware store, a business that apparently dated back to the town's early days, based on the Est 1865 painted on its sign. Could this be connected to the Davidson mentioned in the letter? Had a family business thrived for generations on the proceeds of betrayal and possibly murder? The implications of her discovery were expanding beyond a simple hidden treasure map. She had stumbled upon what might be evidence of a historical crime: the disappearance of two prominent Confederate veterans, potentially murdered for their knowledge of hidden assets. Assets that, if the historical record was accurate, had never been recovered and might still remain hidden in the mountains just outside town. Arriving home, Eliza found Haley lounging on the porch swing they had recently restored, reading one of her fantasy novels. The normalcy of the scene, a teenage girl enjoying a lazy Sunday afternoon, contrasted sharply with the historical intrigue consuming Eliza's thoughts. "Hey, Mum, did you know this house is supposedly haunted?" Haley asked as Eliza joined her on the porch. Diana's mom told her the original owner disappeared mysteriously, and people say his ghost still walks the hallways looking for something he hid. Eliza nearly dropped her bag. Where did she hear that story? Haley shrugged. It's just local legend. Apparently everybody in town knows it. Diana thinks it's cool that we live in the haunted Beaumont house. It's given me some social credit at school. The casual revelation that their house had a well-known reputation complicated matters further. If local legends already connected the property to something hidden, others might have searched for it before. Perhaps some still were. "It's just stories, honey," Eliza said, trying to sound casual. "Old houses always collect ghost tales over the years." But as they went inside to prepare dinner, Eliza couldn't shake the feeling that her innocent renovation project had unveiled something far more significant than she had bargained for. A 150-year-old mystery involving Confederate treasure, possible murder, and secrets that someone somewhere might still have reason to protect. That evening, after Haley had gone to bed, Eliza returned to the hidden compartment and carefully re-examined each document, this time looking specifically for any mention of Davidson or clues about the precise location of the Treasury. The journal contained several references to D in later entries, describing him as increasingly curious and not to be trusted with our purpose, suggesting growing suspicion prior to Beaumont's disappearance. The map, when compared with modern topographical charts of the area she accessed online, indicated a location deep within what was now protected forest land, approximately a 3-hour hike from the nearest current road access. Satellite images showed dense tree cover, making it impossible to determine if there might be visible signs of an old mine entrance or other relevant features. As midnight approached, Eliza found herself at a crossroads. She could report her discovery to authorities, the Historical Society, university researchers, perhaps even the FBI, given the potential value of a lost Confederate treasury. This would be the responsible, ethical choice, and would likely bring historical recognition. Or she could attempt to locate the treasury herself, using the map and journal as guides. If successful, she would face moral and legal questions about ownership of historical artifacts potentially worth millions. but might also secure her and Haley's financial future in a way her teacher's salary and museum tour guide position never could. A third option increasingly pressed on her consciousness, the possibility that others might already know about. This secret, perhaps passed down through generations of local families like the Davidsons. If the historical record hinted at murder over this treasure in 1872, what might modern knowledge of its location prompt in the present day? As Eliza sat contemplating her options late into the night, the sound of a vehicle slowly driving past. Her house caught her attention. Peeking through the curtains, she observed an unfamiliar black SUV crawling along the street, its occupants seemingly studying her property. When the vehicle passed under a streetlight, she glimpsed a Davidson hardware logo on its door panel. Coincidence? She whispered to herself, backing away from the window. The timing seemed too perfect to be random, coming just hours after. She had actively researched the Beaumont-Harrison-Davidson connection at the Historical Society. Sleep came fitfully that night, filled with dreams of secret tunnels, Civil War soldiers, and shadowy figures watching her home. By morning, Eliza had formulated a plan. She would pursue her investigation independently while maintaining absolute secrecy, at least until she better understood what she was dealing with and who might have interest in her discovery. Monday brought Haley back to school and Eliza to her shift at the Historical Society Museum. Between tours, she casually approached Bradley Townsend, the Society's resident Civil War expert, a bearded 30-something with a PhD in American history, who had seemingly found his perfect niche in this history-rich small town. "Dr. Townsend, I keep hearing visitors ask about Confederate Treasury rumors. Was there actually lost Confederate gold around here, or is that just local legend?" she asked during their lunch break, careful to frame her question as professional. Interest rather than personal investigation. Bradley's eyes lit up. "Call me Brad, please. And yes, those stories have substantial historical basis. When Richmond fell in April 1865, the Confederate Treasury held about $500,000 in gold and silver coins, plus millions in banknotes and bonds. Only a small portion was ever recovered by Union forces. So the rest just disappeared," Eliza prompted. "Records suggest much of it was dispersed south through Georgia with retreating officials," Brad explained enthusiastically. "Several contingents passed through this region, and at least one detachment of Treasury guards with significant assets was documented in Harpersville in late April 1865. And what happened to them? That's where history becomes murky and legend takes over." Brad lowered his voice conspiratorially. "Official records show most Treasury assets were surrendered or captured, but local stories persist about Confederate officers hiding portions in caves and abandoned mines throughout the region, with plans to fund a resurgence that never materialized." This aligned perfectly with what Eliza had found in Beaumont's journal. Have people searched for it over the years? "Treasure hunters have combed these mountains since Reconstruction," Brad confirmed. "The Historical Society receives several research requests annually from people convinced they've decoded some clue. The Davidson family particularly funded multiple expeditions in the early 1900s, though nothing was ever officially discovered." The mention of the Davidsons again sent a shiver down Eliza's spine. Were they connected to the Confederate effort? Interestingly, no. Jeremiah Davidson was actually a Union sympathizer who established his hardware business here after the war, Brad replied. His sudden prosperity was something of a local mystery, especially since he expanded aggressively in 1872 after two prominent Confederate veterans, Colonel Beaumont and Captain Harrison, disappeared while allegedly prospecting in the mountains. Every new detail seemed to strengthen the connection between her discovery and local history, but Brad's next statement truly startled her. The current Davidson heir, Richard Davidson III, maintains an almost obsessive interest in Beaumont House. Your house, Brad added. He's petitioned the Historical Society repeatedly to declare it a historic landmark, offering substantial donations to fund an archaeological survey of the property. The previous owner always refused, which is partly why the house remained unoccupied for so long. Davidson essentially discouraged other buyers until the estate finally circumvented him by dropping the price dramatically during a brief period when he was overseas. Eliza struggled to maintain her casual demeanor. That's unusual. So, he believes there's something historically significant about the house. He claims his family records indicate Beaumont had historical documents of immense significance hidden somewhere on the property, Brad explained. Most of us considered it a wealthy man's hobby until he hired a team of historical researchers from Atlanta last year. They'd been systematically working through Davidson family archives and local historical records. The conversation was interrupted by Eliza's next scheduled tour, but her mind reeled with implications. Richard Davidson III apparently had family, knowledge passed down through generations about something hidden in her house, and had actively tried to prevent others from purchasing the property. The mysterious SUV from the previous night suddenly seemed far more ominous. After work, rather than heading directly home, Eliza drove to the county records office. With her employment at the Historical Society as cover for her research interests, she requested property records for both her house and the surrounding properties. The documents revealed something surprising. While her house had changed hands numerous times over the years, the Davidson family had gradually acquired every adjacent property, essentially surrounding Beaumont House with Davidson-owned land. Only her direct parcel remained beyond their control. Even more concerning was a pending application filed just 3 weeks earlier, after her purchase, but before she moved in, by Davidson Heritage Holdings LLC requesting zoning reconsideration for the entire block, including her property. The stated purpose was historical preservation and archaeological research. Eliza's hands trembled as she photographed the documents with her phone. It appeared Richard Davidson was attempting to use legal means to gain access to her property, perhaps knowing exactly what might be hidden there, and growing impatient after generations of family pursuit. Driving home through Harpersville's quaint town center, she passed Davidson Hardware, the impressive 3-story brick building that anchored Main Street. A sleek black Mercedes was parked in the reserved space near the entrance. Beside it, the black SUV she had seen cruising past her house. A chill ran down her spine as a distinguished-looking man in his 60s emerged from the store, his bearing suggesting authority and wealth. Richard Davidson III, she presumed, the heir apparent to whatever family secrets connected to her discovery. Arriving home, Eliza found Haley in animated conversation with an elderly woman on their front porch. As she approached, the woman turned, revealing a kind face etched with deep wrinkles and remarkably sharp blue eyes. "Mom, this is Mrs. Harmon. She knew the people who lived here in the 1960s. Haley called excitedly. She has amazing stories about this place. "Margaret Harmon," the woman introduced herself with a firm handshake. "I was just telling your lovely daughter that I grew up visiting this house when the Clements family lived here. My grandmother also worked here much earlier when she first came to America. She was a housekeeper for the Harrison family who bought the place after poor Colonel Beaumont disappeared." Eliza's pulse quickened. Harrison, as in Captain Thomas Harrison? A knowing look crossed Mrs. Harmon's face. His son, actually. Captain Harrison and Colonel Beaumont both vanished in 1872. Harrison's widow inherited the Beaumont house as part of some prior arrangement between the men. The families were deeply connected. This was an unexpected connection. The house had passed to Harrison's family after the disappearances, suggesting a planned contingency rather than random fate. "Would you like to come in for tea?" Eliza, offered, intuition telling her this chance encounter might not be entirely coincidental. As Haley prepared the tea, Mrs. Harmon spoke in hushed tones. "You've found something in the house, haven't you? Something hidden." Eliza hesitated, studying the elderly woman carefully. "What makes you ask that?" "Because Richard Davidson's men have been watching your house since you moved in," Mrs. Harmon replied matter-of-factly. "And because the Davidson family has been searching for something connected to Beaumont and Harrison for generations. My grandmother passed down stories of secret compartments and hidden passages built into this house, and warnings about Davidson family obsession." Deciding to trust her instincts, Eliza nodded slightly. "I may have found something during renovations, historical documents." "The map," Mrs. Harmon stated, rather than asked. When Eliza's eyes widened in surprise, the elderly woman continued. "My grandmother was Ukrainian. She could read English but not write it well. Harrison's widow kept her on because she couldn't read the family documents and therefore couldn't betray their secrets. But she saw things, the map, the journal, letters about Confederate gold hidden in the mountains." "Why are you telling me this?" Eliza asked cautiously. "Because the Davidsons have hunted that treasure for 150 years, beginning with Jeremiah Davidson, who almost certainly murdered Beaumont and Harrison to find it. They've gained wealth and power in this town through other means, but the obsession has never died. Whatever you found, you're in danger as long as Richard Davidson believes you might know something he doesn't." The gravity of Mrs. Harmon's warning settled over Eliza like a physical weight. "What should I do?" "Be careful who you trust," Mrs. Harmon advised, rising to leave as Haley returned with the tea. "And remember, the Harrisons hid things in plain sight, disguised as something else entirely. The greatest treasures are often where no one thinks to look." After the enigmatic Mrs. Harmon departed with promises to share more family stories soon, Eliza found herself more determined than ever. That evening, after Haley's homework was completed and she was engrossed in a video call with friends, Eliza returned to her examination of the hidden documents. The map showed the route to the mountain location, but something about Mrs. Harmon's parting words nagged at her. Looking at the document with fresh eyes, she noticed something peculiar. Small numbers written within the decorative border, seemingly random but potentially significant. Recalling her teaching days deciphering educational puzzles for students, Eliza recognized a simple substitution cipher with numbers corresponding to letters. Working methodically, she began translating the border notations. After an hour, a message emerged. "The map leads to nothing. The true location lies beneath the 7th floorboard from the east wall, where the morning sun first touches the colonel's portrait." Her hands trembling with excitement, Eliza hurried to the dining room where she had noticed unusual wear patterns in the floor. Counting 7 boards from the east-facing wall, she examined the wood carefully. Unlike surrounding boards, this one had a nearly imperceptible seam on one end. Using a thin prying tool from her renovation kit, Eliza carefully worked the edge until the board lifted, revealing a narrow cavity beneath. Inside lay another brass key, smaller than the first, wrapped in a yellowed piece of paper with a simple message. "When all seems lost, look to the stars." The cryptic message made little immediate sense, but the key was unmistakably old and significant. Examining the room, Eliza sought any lock that might match this smaller key. Nothing obvious presented itself in the dining room, and a search of nearby rooms proved equally fruitless. Returning to Beaumont's journal, she scoured the entries for any mention of stars, finding a passage from February 1872. "The celestial guide remains our surest protection against discovery. Even should our papers be compromised, only one who understands the heavens as Harrison does would make the connection." The Treasury chamber entrance, once sealed, will remain undetectable without the stellar key. Harrison had been an amateur astronomer according to one historical society document she'd photographed earlier. This connection to stars suggested the hiding place might somehow be aligned with astronomical features, perhaps a location best identified by stellar positions. Exhausted but exhilarated by her progress, Eliza carefully replaced everything, deciding to continue her investigation the following day. As she secured the hidden panel in her bedroom wall, a car door slammed outside. Peering through the curtains, she observed two men in dark clothing standing beside the black SUV from Davidson Hardware, openly photographing her house. The implied threat sent a surge of protective determination through her. This wasn't just about historical discovery or potential treasure anymore. These people believed she knew something valuable and were watching her family. Whatever secrets lay hidden in her house, she needed to uncover them quickly before the Davidsons took more aggressive action. The next day, Tuesday, Eliza called in sick to the Historical Society and kept Haley home from school, claiming a stomach virus had struck them both. The real purpose was to conduct a thorough, uninterrupted examination of the house without worrying about uninvited visitors or interruptions. "We're going on a treasure hunt," she told a confused but excited Haley over breakfast. "This house has secrets, and I think it's time we discovered them together." Haley's eyes widened. "Like the ghost stories Diana mentioned?" "Better than ghosts," Eliza replied, deciding that honesty, at least partial honesty, was the best approach with her perceptive daughter. "I found a hidden compartment with old documents that suggest the original owner, Colonel Beaumont, hid something valuable somewhere in this house or on the property." Historical documents mention a stellar key and astronomical connections. Haley, whose interest in science had recently expanded to include astronomy, immediately made a connection Eliza had missed. "The ceiling in the front parlor. It has those weird painted stars that don't match any real constellations. I noticed them the first day but thought it was just bad decoration." Racing to the parlor, Eliza looked up at what she had dismissed as a poorly executed decorative ceiling painting. The scattered gold stars on the midnight blue background had seemed like amateurish Victorian embellishment, but viewing them now with new understanding, she recognized they indeed formed no known constellation pattern. "They're a code," Haley declared confidently, her teenage enthusiasm for puzzles and escape rooms proving unexpectedly valuable. "Look, they're connected by almost invisible lines. It's a map overlaid on stars." Examining more closely, Eliza could just make out faint lines connecting certain stars, creating a pattern that indeed resembled a map. Specifically, a layout of the house itself, with one particular star glowing brighter than the others directly over what would be the library. The library, a small room off the main parlor, had been on their renovation back burner, its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves still filled with ancient, dusty volumes left behind by previous owners. They had been using it primarily for storage, piling boxes in front of shelves they hadn't yet explored. Moving their renovation supplies aside, mother and daughter began a methodical examination of the room, focusing on the precise spot indicated by the brightest star in the ceiling map. The location corresponded to a particular bookshelf against the north wall. "We need to check if this moves or has a hidden compartment," Eliza directed, running her hands along the ornately carved wooden framework. Working together, they emptied the shelf of books, many of which appeared to have remained untouched for decades. Behind a collection of leather-bound encyclopedias, Haley discovered a small brass plate with a keyhole that matched the dimensions of the key Eliza had found beneath the floorboard. "Mom, I found it!" she called excitedly. With trembling hands, Eliza inserted the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, and a soft click echoed in the quiet room. Rather than opening a compartment as expected, the entire bookshelf pivoted slightly. Revealing it was mounted on hidden hinges. "A secret door," Haley whispered, awestruck, "just like in movies." Together, they pulled the bookshelf forward, revealing a narrow passageway behind it, a hidden corridor built within the unusually thick walls of the house. Stone steps led downward into darkness, the air cool and damp as it wafted upward from below. Retrieving flashlights from their renovation supplies, they cautiously began descending the stairs, which spiraled downward past the level of their known basement, into what appeared to be a previously undiscovered sub-basement chamber. The stairs ended in a small antechamber with brick walls and a packed earth floor. A heavy wooden door with iron banding blocked further progress, its surface marked with the now familiar crossed pick-and-shovel symbol from the map. "It's an entrance to the mine," Eliza realized aloud. The house was built with a direct connection to the underground tunnel system that leads to the Treasury location. They didn't just hide documents here, they created a secret access route. The door had no visible keyhole, but a circular indentation in its center seemed designed to receive something approximately the size of a large coin. Remembering the Confederate insignia on the document box from the hidden wall compartment, Eliza hurried back upstairs to retrieve it. Returning with the box, she examined its ornate lid more closely. The brass Confederate seal appeared to be a separate piece attached to the box. Carefully working with her renovation tools, she managed to detach it, revealing it was indeed a sophisticated key of sorts, with protruding elements on its backside. When placed into the circular indentation on the door, it fit perfectly. Turning it clockwise produced a series of mechanical clicks from inside the door mechanism, and the heavy wooden barrier swung slowly inward on surprisingly well-maintained hinges. Beyond lay a tunnel, not rough-hewn as expected for a mine shaft, but carefully constructed with brick walls and a slightly arched ceiling, large enough to walk through comfortably. Iron brackets for torches lined the walls at regular intervals, though any torches had long since disintegrated. "This is incredible," Haley breathed, her flashlight beam dancing along the tunnel ahead. "How far does it go?" According to the map, the tunnel extended approximately 1 mile underground, connecting to the abandoned mine where the treasury had been hidden. But whether that tunnel remained fully intact after 150 years was impossible to know without exploration. "We should go back and prepare properly," Eliza decided, maternal caution overriding her excitement. "If we're going to explore this, we need better lights, water, proper shoes, and to tell someone where we're going." "Tell who?" Haley asked. "If those Davidson guys are watching the house and might be dangerous, who can we trust?" It was a perceptive question that highlighted their precarious situation. The Davidson family clearly had resources, local influence, and potentially generations of accumulated knowledge about what they sought. If Richard Davidson discovered they had found the tunnel entrance, what might he do to secure access? As they stood contemplating their next steps, the distant sound of breaking glass echoed from upstairs, followed by heavy footsteps moving through their home. Someone had entered the house. "Back inside, quickly," Eliza whispered, pulling Haley into the tunnel and carefully closing the heavy door behind them. The mechanism automatically locked when the door closed, sealing them inside the passage, but also preventing unwanted followers. In the beam of their flashlights, mother and daughter exchanged looks of determination mixed with fear. The decision had been made for them. Forward was now their only option. "Stay close to me," Eliza instructed, taking Haley's hand as they began moving deeper into the tunnel. "Whatever happens, we stick together." The passage sloped gently downward, occasionally opening into wider chambers with support beams before narrowing again. Despite its age, the construction remained remarkably sound, with only occasional debris on the packed earth floor. After approximately 20 minutes of careful progress, they reached a junction where the brick-lined passage connected to a rougher tunnel that showed signs of mining activity, pick marks visible on stone walls and remnants of old rail tracks. Embedded in the floor, "We must be under the forest land now," Eliza estimated, consulting the photographed map on her phone. The battery showed 62% remaining. They needed to be judicious with their electronic resources. The map indicated they should follow the left passage at this junction, which appeared to lead deeper into the mountain. As they proceeded, the tunnel began to show signs of intentional modification, sections reinforced with additional timbers and brick arches supporting potentially weak areas. Nearly 40 minutes into their journey, the passage widened dramatically into what was clearly a purposefully constructed chamber approximately 30 feet in diameter. Their flashlight beams caught something reflective, metal gleaming in. The darkness. Wooden crates lined the walls, many broken open or deteriorated with age, but their contents remained largely intact. Gold and silver coins spilled across the earthen floor, weathered but still recognizable Confederate currency in bundled stacks, silver bars stamped with the Confederate seal, military equipment including swords with ornate hilts and ceremonial firearms, even crates of historical documents bearing official seals and signatures. "Oh my God," Eliza whispered, the beam of her flashlight dancing across what could only be described as a treasure trove of Civil War-era riches and historical artifacts. Haley stood speechless beside her, the reality of their discovery exceeding even the most fantastic elements of the ghost stories and legends that had circulated about Beaumont House for generations. In the center of the chamber stood a stone pedestal supporting a metal box similar to the one Eliza had found in the wall compartment, but larger and more elaborately decorated. Opening it revealed a leather-bound ledger listing the contents of the hidden treasury, gold and silver worth approximately $2 million in 1865 currency, equivalent to nearly $35 million today, plus priceless historical artifacts, including the personal correspondence of Jefferson Davis and official Confederate government documents never known to have survived the fall of Richmond. The historical significance alone was staggering, potentially rewriting aspects of Civil War history. The monetary value, while substantial, seemed almost secondary to the historical importance of what lay preserved in this chamber, hidden for 150 years from both Union authorities and treasure hunters. As they examined their discovery, a distant sound echoed through the tunnel behind them, voices and shuffling movements suggesting they were not alone in the passage. Someone had found the entrance and was following their trail. "We need to document this quickly," Eliza decided, using her phone to photograph the chamber contents while Haley stood watch at the tunnel entrance. "Whatever happens, there needs to be a record of what's really here." The approaching voices grew louder as Eliza frantically captured images of the treasure and historical documents. When footsteps sounded just around the final bend in the tunnel, she grabbed Haley, and they pressed themselves into a shadowy alcove, flashlights extinguished. 3 figures emerged into the chamber, their own powerful flashlights sweeping across the treasure. Richard Davidson III led the group, his distinguished features twisted with an expression of triumph and obsession. Behind him followed 2 younger men carrying what appeared to be sample cases and sophisticated scanning equipment. "After all these generations," Davidson breathed, kneeling to run his fingers through a pile of gold coins. "My great-grandfather was right. Beaumont and Harrison hid it all here, just as he suspected after eliminating them." The casual confirmation of his ancestors' murderous actions chilled Eliza to the bone. The Davidson family legacy was built on betrayal and blood, their century-and-a-half quest driven by both greed and the need to conceal their original crime. "Sir, there's evidence someone was here very recently," one of the younger men reported, examining fresh footprints in the dirt. Two people, one smaller than the other. Davidson's expression hardened. "The teacher and her daughter. They must be in here somewhere. Find them. They've seen too much already." As the men began searching the chamber's perimeter, Eliza noticed something she had overlooked, a narrow gap behind several crates near their hiding spot, possibly leading to another passage. Silently gesturing to Haley, they began inching toward this potential escape route. When one of Davidson's men moved a crate, temporarily blocking the other's view, Eliza and Haley slipped through the gap, finding themselves in a crude secondary tunnel that appeared to have been an emergency exit route. Unlike the main passage, this one was rough-hewn and narrower, clearly designed for escape rather than transporting treasure. They moved as quietly as possible, the sounds of the search behind them providing cover for any noise they couldn't avoid. The escape tunnel climbed steadily upward, sometimes requiring them to scramble over fallen rocks or squeeze through narrow sections. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged through a cleverly disguised opening set into a rocky hillside, concealed by thick vegetation that had grown undisturbed for decades. They found themselves in dense forest, the late afternoon sun filtering through the canopy above. Using her phone's GPS, Eliza determined they were approximately 4 miles from town, in what was now protected forest land. With Davidson and his men potentially still pursuing, they needed to reach civilization and authorities quickly. "Mom, what do we do now?" Haley asked, her voice remarkably steady despite their dire circumstances. "They know where we live. They know what we found." Eliza made a swift decision. "We go public with everything. It's our only protection. We document what we discovered and ensure the whole world knows about the Treasury, the historical significance, and the Davidson family's connection to Beaumont and Harrison's disappearance." The route through the forest was challenging, but Eliza's determination drove them forward. They needed to reach someone they could trust before Davidson emerged from the tunnel and began a more organized pursuit. As they hiked, Eliza used her phone to email the photographs she had taken to multiple recipients: the Historical Society, the State Historical Preservation Office, several university history departments, and even major news outlets. She included a brief explanation of their discovery and the danger they now faced from Richard Davidson. "The truth is our shield," she told Haley as they finally reached a Forest Service road. "Whatever happens next, we've ensured this discovery won't be hidden again or claimed exclusively by those who killed to keep it secret." The Forest Service road stretched before them like a lifeline, winding through the dense Georgia woodland. Eliza and Haley had been walking for nearly 40 minutes when the rumble of an approaching vehicle sent them diving into the underbrush. Their caution proved warranted as the black Davidson hardware SUV roared past, heading toward the hidden tunnel entrance they had left behind. "They're searching in the wrong direction," Haley whispered, relief evident in her voice. "For now," Eliza cautioned, "we need to keep moving." They continued down the road, each step carrying them closer to safety, but also deeper into the moral and ethical questions their discovery had raised. The treacherous beauty of their surroundings, late afternoon sunlight filtering through ancient trees that had stood silent witness to Civil War soldiers passing beneath their branches, seemed to emphasize the historical significance of what they had uncovered. "Mom," Haley said as they walked, showing a maturity beyond her 14 years, "that treasure doesn't just represent money, does it? It's complicated." Eliza glanced at her remarkable daughter with pride. "Very complicated. Confederate gold carries painful historical significance. Some would argue it represents funds intended to preserve slavery, while others would see it as simply historical artifacts. The documents might be even more valuable to historians than the gold itself." "Do we get to keep any of it?" Haley asked. The practical question of a child who had watched her mother struggle financially. I don't know, sweetheart. Legally, archaeological findings on federal land belong to the government, but there are often finders' rewards, and the historical significance might change things. Eliza squeezed her daughter's hand. What matters most is that we've connected to history in a way few people ever do. Whatever happens next, we've already found something priceless. Truth. The sound of another approaching vehicle tensed their bodies for flight, but this time it was an elderly couple in a pickup truck who stopped immediately upon seeing them. You folks need a ride? The grey-haired man called out, concern evident on his weathered face. Not safe to be walking these roads with evening coming on. Bears get active around dusk. Eliza made a split-second decision. Yes, thank you. We got turned around on a hike and lost our bearings. As they climbed into the truck bed, Haley whispered, Can we trust them? Not everyone in Harpersville is connected to the Davidsons, Eliza murmured. Sometimes ordinary kindness is just that, kindness. The elderly couple, Martha and Jim Coleman, turned out to be retired forest rangers who lived just outside Harpersville. They listened with increasing astonishment as Eliza shared a carefully edited version of their situation, mentioning the historical discovery but omitting the Davidson family's direct involvement. Land sakes, a Confederate Treasury cache? Jim exclaimed. People have been searching for that since my grandfather's time. Martha nodded vigorously. You need to talk to Sheriff Palmer right away. Kate's as honest as they come, been fighting the Davidson influence in local politics for years. This unexpected alliance provided both transportation and valuable local insight. Rather than returning directly to Beaumont House, the Colemans drove Eliza and Haley straight to the sheriff's department on the outskirts of town. Sheriff Catherine. Palmer proved to be everything the Colemans had suggested, a straight-talking professional in her late 40s whose family had served in local law enforcement for generations. She listened to their full account, including the Davidson connection, with a face that revealed little but eyes that missed nothing. The Davidsons have had their fingers in every pie in this county for as long as I can remember, Sheriff Palmer acknowledged after Eliza finished her account. But allegations of historical murder and present-day breaking and entering are beyond even their usual manipulations. We'll need hard evidence. Eliza produced her phone with the photographs of the treasure chamber, the documentation of Davidson's intrusion into their home, and the email she had sent to create a public record of their discovery. This is a start, Palmer nodded approvingly, but treasure claims bring out the worst in people. The Davidsons have 3 generations of lawyers on retainer and half the county council in their pocket. We need to secure both you and the site. Immediately. Within an hour, the sheriff's office had transformed into a command center of activity. State police had been notified. Federal authorities with jurisdiction over historical artifacts were en route from Atlanta, and a protective detail had been assigned to Eliza and Haley. Sheriff Palmer had moved with impressive efficiency, recognizing both the historical significance of the discovery and the very real danger the Davidsons might pose. We've secured Beaumont House, a deputy reported, entering Palmer's office where Eliza and Haley were drinking hot chocolate provided by the department's motherly administrator. Signs of forced entry through the back door, but no one present when our team arrived. We've stationed officers at all entrances. Palmer nodded. Davidson will have gone to ground the moment he realized Ms. Morgan had documentation and had gone public. He's many things, but not stupid. What happens now? Eliza asked, the adrenaline of their escape finally fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Now you get some rest in our safe house while we coordinate with federal authorities, Palmer replied. By morning, we'll have a multi-agency task force in place to properly excavate and document the site. Archaeological experts, historical, preservation officials, and enough armed officers to discourage any Davidson interference. The sheriff's safe house turned out to be her own comfortable farmhouse just outside town limits, where her wife Linda, a literature professor at the regional community college, welcomed Eliza and Haley with home-cooked food and comfortable beds. "Kate's been trying to build a case against Richard Davidson for years," Linda confided, as she served apple cobbler after dinner. "His family has been untouchable in this town since the Reconstruction era. Too much money, too many connections, too willing to destroy anyone who challenges them." "Why does Sheriff Palmer keep fighting them then?" Haley asked, savoring her dessert. Linda smiled proudly. "Because some people believe justice matters more than comfort or safety." Kate's grandfather was run out of the sheriff's office in the 1960s for investigating Davidson illegal activities. She ran for sheriff specifically to continue his work. Here was yet another layer to the complex social history of Harpersville: generations of conflict between those who sought truth and those who profited from its concealment. Eliza's accidental discovery had merely brought long, simmering tensions to a boiling point. That night, as Haley slept in the adjacent guest room, Eliza found herself unable to rest despite her exhaustion. Sitting by the window overlooking Sheriff Palmer's moonlit pasture, she contemplated how dramatically her life had changed in the weeks since purchasing Beaumont House. What had begun as a desperate attempt to secure affordable housing had evolved into a historical treasure hunt, with potentially life-changing implications. Would the discovery provide financial security for her and Haley? The legal questions around ownership were complex. Would they even be able to return to Beaumont House, or had it now become simply another historical site, its personal meaning overshadowed by its historical significance? Most importantly, had she made the right choices in pursuing this discovery, potentially placing Haley in danger? A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Sheriff Palmer entered, still in uniform despite the late hour, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "Thought you might be awake," she said, offering a steaming mug. "First nights are always the hardest after something like this. I keep wondering if I should have just sealed up that hidden panel and pretended I never found it," Eliza admitted. Accepting the tea gratefully, Palmer settled into a chair opposite her. "And then what? Live in a house surrounded by Davidson-owned property, always wondering when they might find another way to access what they've sought for generations? Always looking over your shoulder?" "When you put it that way, the truth has a weight to it," Palmer continued. "Once discovered, it demands acknowledgement. You could no more have ignored what you found than you could ignore your own daughter." Eliza sipped her tea thoughtfully. "I was just trying to create a stable home. Instead, you may have changed the economic future of this entire community," Palmer replied. "Do you realize what a properly managed historical discovery like this could mean for Harpersville? Tourism, research grants, museum development, jobs and opportunities beyond the Davidson family's control." This perspective shifted something in Eliza's understanding. Her discovery wasn't just personally significant, it represented potential, transformation for a town that had lived under the shadow of one family's influence for generations. "The Davidsons aren't just after gold," Palmer continued. "They're after the power that comes from controlling history, deciding which stories get told and which remain buried. You've challenged that control, and that makes you more dangerous to them than any amount of Confederate treasure." By morning, the scale of response to Eliza's discovery had become apparent. Federal agents from multiple agencies had established a command post at the sheriff's department. Archaeological teams from the state university were preparing equipment for site documentation. News vans from Atlanta had begun arriving, setting up satellite dishes on the town square. Dr. Lenore Wilkins from the Historical Society briefed on the discovery, had mobilized her own team to begin cataloguing the historical significance. Her eyes shone with academic excitement when she met with Eliza over breakfast at the Palmer farmhouse. "My dear, you've uncovered what may be the most significant Civil War documentary archive found this century," she gushed. "The Treasury gold is sensational, of course, but the documents you photographed include what appear to be missing pages from Jefferson Davis's personal correspondence, and possibly the lost Confederate naval codes. Even Brad Townsend, the Historical Society's resident Civil War expert, had been granted security clearance to join the documentation team. His expertise would prove invaluable in establishing the provenance and significance of their findings. The Beaumont-Harrison underground passage appears on no historical documents," he explained enthusiastically as they reviewed site maps with federal officials. "It represents a completely unknown aspect of post-Civil War contingency planning by Confederate loyalists." By mid-morning, a carefully orchestrated operation was underway. Under Sheriff Palmer's coordination, federal agents had secured the tunnel entrance within Beaumont House, while state police established a perimeter around the property. Archaeological teams prepared to enter the tunnel system with proper documentation equipment, and historians stood ready to catalogue any findings according to established protocols for historical artifacts. Richard Davidson, meanwhile, had seemingly vanished. His home stood empty, his office at Davidson Hardware locked, his black Mercedes missing from its usual parking space. Sheriff Palmer had issued a BOLO, be on the lookout, notice to surrounding jurisdictions, but her expression suggested she expected a protracted effort to locate him. "Men like Davidson have escape plans and hidden resources," she explained when Eliza asked about the search. "He won't just be hiding, he'll be strategizing, calling in favors, mobilizing lawyers." As if on cue, the sheriff's phone rang. After a brief conversation, her expression hardened. "Davidson's attorneys have just filed an emergency injunction, claiming the entire treasure find is located on land technically owned by Davidson Heritage Holdings through a complex series of historical easements," she reported. "They're demanding immediate cessation of all recovery efforts pending court resolution." "Can they do that?" Eliza asked, alarmed. "They can try," Palmer replied grimly, "but federal jurisdiction over historical artifacts trumps local property disputes. The excavation continues while the legal battle unfolds." That battle erupted across multiple fronts throughout the day. Davidson's attorneys filed papers in 3 different courts. His political allies on the county commission called an emergency meeting to discuss unauthorized archaeological activities. Even the local newspaper, the Harpersville Herald, published an editorial questioning whether outsiders should control our town's historical resources, a transparent attempt to stir resentment against federal involvement. Yet for every Davidson maneuver, unexpected allies emerged to counter it. Mrs. Harmon arrived at the sheriff's office with a box of Harrison family documents that potentially invalidated Davidson's claim to any easement rights. The state historical preservation officer issued an emergency protection order for both Beaumont House and the tunnel system. University legal experts volunteered to represent Eliza's interests pro bono, recognizing the historical significance of her discovery. Most surprisingly, a group of prominent Harpersville business owners publicly announced their support for full federal investigation, tired of generations of Davidson dominance in local affairs. The owner of the Magnolia Cafe even established a GoFundMe page for Eliza and Haley's expenses during the disruption, which rapidly exceeded its initial goal as national media coverage expanded. By afternoon, Eliza and Haley were permitted to observe the recovery operation from a safe distance. Wearing hard hats and escorted by federal agents, they watched as professional archaeologists documented every aspect of the treasure chamber. before removing a single item. "This is like a movie," Haley whispered as they observed the meticulous process, her eyes wide with wonder. "Our house has a secret passage to actual buried treasure." The federal archaeologist leading the team, Dr. Samantha Reeves, approached them during a brief break. "We've only begun preliminary documentation, but I can already tell you this is one of the most significant Civil War finds in decades. The preservation is remarkable. The dry conditions in the chamber protected even paper documents for 150 years." "What happens to everything?" Eliza asked. "A complex legal process will determine final disposition," Dr. Reeves explained. "But typically, items of national historical significance are preserved in appropriate museums and archives, with finders' rights and ownership claims addressed through established protocols." "Does that mean we might get some kind of reward?" Haley asked with typical teenage directness. Dr. Reeves smiled. "Finders' fees are standard in cases like this. More importantly, your mother will likely be credited in all historical documentation as the discoverer, potentially opening academic and professional opportunities. Discovery of this magnitude changes career trajectories." This offhand comment planted a seed in Eliza's mind. Her teaching career had been derailed by budget cuts, but perhaps this discovery opened new possibilities. Her methodical approach to investigation, her attention to historical detail, her ability to connect seemingly unrelated clues, these skills had value beyond the elementary school classroom. As evening approached, they returned to Sheriff Palmer's farmhouse for another night of protective custody. The day's events had generated national headlines, with major networks featuring the school teacher who found Confederate millions story prominently. "You've become quite the celebrity," Linda Palmer commented as they watched the news coverage together. "How does it feel?" "Overwhelming," Eliza admitted. 24 hours ago, I was running for my life through the forest. Now, I'm watching myself on national news. "Fame is fleeting," Sheriff Palmer advised, joining them with a tray of sandwiches. "But impact lasts. Whatever happens with the treasure itself, you've changed this town forever. The Davidson stranglehold is broken. Too many eyes watching now. Too many authorities involved." A breaking news alert interrupted their conversation. Local reporters were live outside Davidson Hardware, where FBI agents were removing boxes of documents and computer equipment. "The federal warrant covers potential evidence of historical artifact trafficking," the reporter explained breathlessly. "Sources suggest authorities are investigating whether the Davidson family may have recovered and sold other Civil War artifacts over the years without proper disclosure or registration." Palmer's phone buzzed with a text message. After reading it, she looked up with grim satisfaction. Richard Davidson was just detained, trying to cross into Canada near Buffalo, New York. Apparently, he had historical documents and several Confederate gold coins in his possession. The news felt like the closing of a circle that had begun 150 years earlier when Jeremiah Davidson likely murdered Beaumont and Harrison to steal their secret. The family's long pursuit of the treasure had ultimately led not to wealth but to exposure and potential prosecution. Later that evening, as Haley chatted excitedly with her friends via video call, suddenly the most interesting student at her new school, Eliza found herself drawn to the farmhouse's wraparound porch. The night air carried the scent of pine and distant rain as she contemplated the journey that had brought her here. Sheriff Palmer joined her, offering a glass of bourbon. "Thought you might need this after the day you've had?" "I never imagined buying that old house would lead to all this," Eliza mused, accepting the drink. "I was just trying to find somewhere affordable to rebuild our lives." "Sometimes the greatest discoveries come when we're simply trying to create stability," Palmer replied. "My grandfather used to say that treasure isn't always what you think it is. The real gold might be the purpose you find along the way." The sheriff's words resonated deeply. Through all the chaos and danger, Eliza had discovered something within herself: resourcefulness, courage, and an unexpected talent for historical investigation that had lain dormant during her teaching years. The archaeological team leader mentioned something about finder's recognition potentially leading to new career opportunities, Eliza said hesitantly. Do you think that's realistic? Palmer smiled. Harpersville Historical Society has operated on a shoestring budget for decades. After this discovery, they'll receive unprecedented funding and attention. They'll need someone with both educational experience and demonstrated historical insight to develop new programs. Someone who's proven they can connect with history in meaningful ways. The suggestion hung in the air, like a possibility taking shape. Not just financial compensation for their discovery, but a new professional direction built on Eliza's natural abilities and this extraordinary experience. The historians keep talking about how this discovery will require rewriting aspects of post-Civil War history, Eliza noted. I never thought I'd be part of something like that. History isn't just written by the winners, Palmer replied. Sometimes it's revealed by the renovators, those willing to strip away old wallpaper and look at what's really underneath. The metaphor wasn't subtle, but it carried truth. In exposing the physical secrets of Beaumont House, Eliza had also uncovered layers of local history that powerful interests had kept concealed for generations. The Davidson family's carefully constructed narrative of respectability, built on entrepreneurship, had masked a foundation of theft and likely murder. What happens to our house now? Eliza asked, the question that had been troubling her throughout the day's excitement. Legally, it remains your property, Palmer assured her. The historical significance means there will likely be preservation requirements for the tunnel entrance and certain architectural features. But with proper supports in place, there's no reason you couldn't continue living there while restoring it. With proper modifications to the security system, Eliza added wryly. Palmer laughed. I think the federal historical preservation grants you'll qualify for might cover state-of-the-art security, not to mention the finder's fee when the Treasury contents are officially valued. The conversation was interrupted by Haley bursting onto the porch, tablet in hand. Mom, the Smithsonian just called Dr. Wilkins. They want to feature our discovery in a special exhibition about lost Civil War treasures. They're asking if we'd be willing to be interviewed for their documentary. The teenager's excitement was contagious, her eyes shining with the thrill of connection to something larger than herself. This unexpected adventure had transformed Haley, too, from the reluctant participant in a forced relocation to an enthusiastic partner in historical discovery. See? Palmer said quietly as Haley scrolled through messages from classmates reacting to news coverage. Treasure comes in many forms. The next morning brought clear skies and new developments. Federal authorities had established a formal joint task force to manage the historical find, with Dr. Wilkins appointed as the local liaison. An initial inventory estimated the gold and silver alone at approximately $28 million in current value, with the historical documents potentially even more valuable to museums and archives. Brad Townsend, practically vibrating with academic excitement, reported that the documents included previously unknown orders signed by Robert E. Lee himself and correspondence that might shed new light on Confederate naval operations that had remained historically obscure. This isn't just about the monetary value, he explained during the morning briefing. This collection represents a time capsule of Confederate government in exile, the operations and plans that continued after the official surrender. It rewrites our understanding of post-Civil War historical dynamics. Sheriff Palmer, meanwhile, reported that Richard Davidson faced multiple federal charges related to illegal excavation of historical artifacts, breaking and entering, and potential witness intimidation. His attorneys had withdrawn their injunction requests as federal investigators uncovered evidence that the Davidson family had recovered and secretly sold other Civil War artifacts over the decades without proper reporting. Most significantly, for Eliza, the U.S. Department of the Interior had dispatched a representative to discuss the future of Beaumont House and its role as a historical site. Rather than forcing her to relocate, they proposed a unique arrangement. She and Haley would retain ownership and occupancy rights, while the house received historical designation and preservation funding, including restoration grants that would cover most of her renovation costs. We've found that historical sites maintain their authenticity best when they remain living homes rather than sterile museums, explained the department representative, a thoughtful woman named Dr. Eleanor Washington. Your discovery has earned you a place in the stewardship of this history. The proposed arrangement included a substantial finder's fee for the Treasury discovery, funds for completing the home renovation to historical standards, and even a potential position for Eliza as the educational director for what would become the Beaumont Harrison Historical Center, operating from a new facility to be constructed adjacent to the property. From school teacher to historical site director, Dr. Washington observed with a smile. Quite a career change. But your background in education combined with your demonstrated historical insight makes you uniquely qualified. As Eliza and Haley stood on Sheriff Palmer's porch, preparing to return to Beaumont House under federal escort, the reality of their transformed circumstances began to sink in. What had begun as desperate necessity, purchasing the only house they could afford, had evolved into historical discovery, danger, and ultimately opportunity. "Do you think we made the right choice?" Haley asked suddenly, a rare moment of teenage uncertainty breaking through her excitement. "Pursuing this, instead of just covering that panel back up when you found it?" Eliza considered the question carefully. "I think some discoveries choose us rather than the other way around. Colonel Beaumont created those hidden spaces hoping the right person would eventually find them. For whatever reason, that person turned out to be us. Because we needed it most?" Haley suggested, unconsciously echoing the wisdom often found in her fantasy novels. Like the treasure was waiting for someone who would use it right? "Maybe," Eliza smiled, drawing her daughter into a hug. "Or maybe because we were willing to look beneath the surface, literally and figuratively, when others just saw old wallpaper and outdated decor." As they drove back toward Beaumont House, now surrounded by official vehicles and research teams, Eliza reflected on the strange journey that had brought them here. The house she had purchased out of financial necessity had become a portal to history, a catalyst for community transformation, and ultimately the foundation for a new beginning far stronger than the one she had initially imagined. The peeling wallpaper that had revealed a hidden panel had in many ways also revealed her own hidden potential. The investigative instincts, courage, and historical intuition that had lain dormant during her years of conventional teaching. Like Beaumont House itself, she contained depths and capacities that had merely awaited the right circumstances for discovery. "Look," Haley pointed as they approached their property. "They've put up a historical marker already." Indeed, a temporary sign had been erected at the entrance to their driveway. Beaumont House, site of historic Confederate Treasury discovery, SD 1871. More permanent recognition would follow, but this simple acknowledgement made the transformation official. Their ordinary home renovation had become an extraordinary historical revelation. Their desperate fresh start had evolved into an unexpected new beginning. And the hidden treasure they had discovered extended far beyond gold coins and historical documents to something more valuable: purpose, possibility, and the powerful reminder that beneath the surface of ordinary things often lie extraordinary. Discoveries, waiting for someone brave enough to peel away the layers concealing them. 6 months had transformed Beaumont House beyond recognition. Where once peeling wallpaper and worn floorboards had greeted visitors, meticulously restored Victorian craftsmanship now showcased the home's historical significance while incorporating modern comforts. The historic preservation grants had funded not just essential repairs, but authentic period restoration, turning the house into both a comfortable home and a living museum. Eliza stood in what had once been her bedroom, the room where a mismatched wallpaper pattern had first revealed the hidden panel, now converted into the Discovery Room exhibit that formed the centerpiece of limited public tours, offered 3 days weekly. A protective glass enclosure preserved the original hidden compartment, allowing visitors to see exactly how the documents had been concealed for generations. Interactive displays explained the cipher systems used by Colonel Beaumont, complete with decodable messages for younger visitors to solve. "The school group from Atlanta is arriving in 15 minutes, Brad Townsend reminded her, poking his head into the room. Once the Historical Society's resident expert, he was now Assistant Director of the Beaumont Harrison Historical Center, bringing academic rigor to complement Eliza's educational expertise. "Thanks, Brad. Is Haley ready with the visualization presentation?" "Teenagers and technology, a perfect match. She's already set up in the media room and running final checks on the 3D tunnel recreation." Eliza smiled with maternal pride. Haley had transformed as dramatically as their house, blossoming from a reluctant transplant to an enthusiastic historical interpreter. Her natural affinity for digital storytelling had made her an invaluable part of the educational team during school vacations and weekends. The sophisticated computer mapping of the tunnel system she'd helped develop had earned recognition from university visualization experts, and even a feature in National Geographic's digital edition. Moving through the house toward the newly constructed visitor center, a tasteful addition connected to the original structure by a glass walkway, Eliza marveled at how thoroughly their lives had changed. The finder's fee for the Confederate Treasury had provided immediate financial security, while the permanent position as educational director offered professional fulfillment beyond what her teaching career had provided. Most importantly, the house that had once represented desperate necessity had become a home infused with purpose and meaning. The visitor center hummed with activity as docents prepared for the day's tours. The main exhibition hall showcased carefully preserved selections from the Confederate Treasury find, each item telling part of a complex historical narrative. Rather than glorifying the Confederacy, the exhibits contextualized the artifacts within the moral complexities of Civil War history, acknowledging the painful realities of slavery while exploring the human stories of those who had hidden, sought, and ultimately discovered these historical remnants. "Mrs. Morgan," called Dr. Eleanor Washington, entering through the main doors. The Department of Interior official who had initially proposed Eliza's role in the historical site had become both mentor and friend over the months of development. "The Smithsonian exhibition opens next week. They've sent preview materials for your approval." She handed over a tablet, displaying the promotional materials for Secrets Beneath, the Beaumont House Discovery, and America's Hidden Histories, the traveling exhibition that would bring national attention to their find. They featured Haley prominently, Eliza noted with surprise, seeing her daughter's image alongside her own in the promotional materials. "The mother-daughter Discovery team makes for a compelling narrative," Dr. Washington replied. "Young people rarely figure prominently in historical discoveries. Haley represents the next generation, engaging with history in new ways." The sound of arriving buses signaled the day's first visitors. Haley emerged from the media room, tablet in hand, now 15 and carrying herself with newfound confidence that extended beyond her historical expertise to her entire demeanor. "Mom," I tweaked the tunnel visualization to include the sound effects. "Dr. Reeves recorded during the archaeological exploration," she announced. "It creates a much more immersive experience." "Excellent thinking," Eliza approved. "Is everything else ready for our Atlanta guests?" "All set. Diana's handling the welcome desk, and Mrs. Harmon is ready for the Living Memories segment." Mrs. Harmon had become a beloved fixture at the Historical Center, sharing her grandmother's stories of working for the Harrison family and offering personal connections to history that resonated powerfully with visitors. Her contributions emphasized that history wasn't just artifacts behind glass, but living memories passed through generations. As the visiting students filed into the orientation theater, Eliza took her position at the podium. Public speaking had once terrified her, but 6 months of conducting tours and educational presentations had transformed this anxiety into confident expertise. "Welcome to Beaumont House," she began, surveying the eager faces before her. "6 months ago, I was a former elementary school teacher who bought this house because it was the only one I could afford. I had no idea that removing old wallpaper would change not just my life, but our understanding of post-Civil War history." The presentation that followed had been refined through dozens of deliveries, but Eliza ensured each telling remained fresh by focusing on the faces before her. Young, people connecting with history through her personal journey. She emphasized not just what had been found, but how ordinary curiosity, persistence, and courage had led to extraordinary discovery. "The most valuable treasures aren't always gold coins or historical documents," she concluded. "Sometimes they're the hidden truths that help us better understand our past and the unexpected pathways that lead us to our future. I came to this house looking for affordable shelter. I found purpose, community, and a completely new beginning." The school presentation unfolded with practiced precision, moving from the orientation theater to specialized exhibition areas. Brad Townsend covered the historical context of the Confederate Treasury. Haley demonstrated the digital visualization of the tunnel system. Mrs. Harmon shared personal recollections, connecting the artifacts to human stories. Each component reflected the collaborative approach that had made the Beaumont-Harrison Historical Center a model for community-based historical interpretation. During the lunch break, as students enjoyed picnic facilities on the beautifully landscaped grounds, Sheriff Palmer arrived for her weekly security update. "Richard Davidson's sentencing is scheduled for next month," she reported, joining Eliza, "on a bench beneath a sprawling oak tree. His attorneys are still pushing for leniency based on family tradition and historical interest, but the federal prosecutors aren't sympathetic." "And the rest of the Davidson family?" Eliza asked. "Fragmenting without Richard's controlling influence. Several younger family members have actually approached the Historical Center about donating Davidson family papers to set the record straight. Apparently, there's been internal conflict for generations about the family's origins and methods." This development reflected the broader community transformation that had followed the Treasury discovery. With the Davidson family's influence diminished, Harpersville was experiencing a renaissance of sorts. Tourism had increased dramatically. New businesses had opened to serve visitors. The Historical Society had expanded its staff and programming. Even property values had risen as the town's historical significance attracted new residents interested in preservation and community revitalization. The town council approved the Heritage District zoning changes, Palmer continued. Main Street buildings will be restored with historical accuracy, and development grants are available for compatible businesses. Davidson Hardware will become the Harpersville Historical Mercantile and Visitor Center once the property forfeiture is complete. The poetic justice wasn't lost on either woman. The business built on betrayal would become a center for historical truth and community benefit. I never imagined buying this old house would transform an entire town, Eliza mused, watching students sketch the historical property for their assigned projects. That's how meaningful change often happens, Palmer replied. Not through grand plans, but through individuals making choices that ripple outward. You could have covered that hidden panel and continued with a simple renovation. Instead, you chose to look deeper, to follow the evidence wherever it led. After the school group departed, Eliza found herself drawn to the secure research room that had been established in what was once the library. Here, historians and archivists carefully catalogued and studied documents from the Treasury, find not currently on display. Dr. Lenore Wilkins, now Research Director Emeritus, looked up from her examination of a leather-bound ledger as Eliza entered. "Our perfect timing," the elderly archivist greeted her. "We've just decoded another section of Beaumont's journal using the cipher key from Harrison's papers. It appears they were planning something far beyond simply hiding Confederate assets." "What do you mean?" Eliza asked, intrigued by this new development. "These entries suggest they were establishing a network of historical preservation sites, places where Confederate documents, particularly those documenting the experiences of ordinary soldiers, would be preserved for future generations." Doctor Wilkins adjusted her glasses excitedly. They weren't just hiding gold. They were trying to ensure that personal histories wouldn't be lost in the official narrative of the war. This revelation added new dimension to her understanding of Colonel Beaumont and Captain Harrison. Beyond their obvious Confederate loyalties lay a more universal human desire to ensure that stories and experiences, even of the defeated, would not be forgotten. They created a time capsule, Eliza realized, not just of valuable items, but of perspectives and experiences they feared history might overlook. "Precisely," Dr. Wilkins agreed, "which makes your discovery all the more significant. You didn't just find Confederate gold. You uncovered voices that had been silenced for 150 years, complicated, sometimes troubling voices, but important to our complete understanding of that period." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Washington, accompanied by a distinguished-looking African-American woman Eliza didn't recognize. "Eliza, I'd like you to meet Dr. Josephine Harcourt from Howard University's History Department." Dr. Washington introduced them. "She's leading a project documenting African-American experiences during Reconstruction and has a particular interest in the Harpersville region. We've been studying your discovery with great interest, Dr. Harcourt explained after pleasant introductions, particularly because this area had several thriving freedmen's communities during Reconstruction that mysteriously disbanded around 1872-1873. The same period when Beaumont and Harrison disappeared, Eliza noted, immediately grasping the potential connection. "Exactly. We believe there may be correlations between Davidson's rise to prominence, the disappearance of the Confederate veterans, and the subsequent displacement of freedmen's communities that had established themselves in this region." This new historical thread represented yet another layer to the story that had begun with peeling wallpaper. The Confederate Treasury discovery wasn't an isolated historical curiosity, but a nexus point connecting multiple historical narratives, military, economic, racial and social. "We'd like to propose an expanded research initiative," Dr. Washington explained. "The Beaumont-Harrison discovery provides a unique opportunity to examine how post-Civil War power dynamics shaped communities like Harpersville for generations. With your permission, we'd like to incorporate these additional perspectives into the Historical Center's programming." "Of course," Eliza agreed immediately. "We've always emphasized that this discovery isn't about glorifying the Confederacy, but understanding our complete history. the admirable, and the troubling. The proposed expansion would bring additional federal grants, university partnerships, and a broader interpretive scope to the historical center. It would also further cement Harpersville's emergence as a center for historical study and tourism, continuing the economic revitalization that had followed the initial discovery. That evening, after the day's visitors had departed and the staff had gone home, Eliza and Haley enjoyed a quiet dinner in their private living quarters, the upstairs portion of Beaumont House that remained their personal space, separate from the exhibition areas. "I got accepted to the Summer History Institute at Emory University," Haley announced casually, between bites of pasta, sliding an acceptance letter across the table. "Full scholarship because of my work on the digital visualization project." Eliza picked up the letter with astonishment. The prestigious program typically accepted only the most promising high school seniors, not 15-year-olds. "Haley, this is incredible. A college-level program." "Dr. Washington recommended me. The professor running it saw my presentation at the State Historical Society conference and made an exception." Haley tried to sound nonchalant, but pride radiated from her expression. "They're especially interested in my ideas about using digital storytelling to make historical connections more accessible to younger audiences." The transformation in her daughter continued to amaze Eliza. The reluctant teenager who had viewed their move to Harpersville as a devastating setback had discovered intellectual passion and purpose through their unexpected adventure. What had begun as financial necessity had opened doors neither of them could have imagined. "I've been thinking," Haley continued, suddenly serious. "Everything changed because you didn't just cover up that hidden panel when you found it. You could have just plastered over it and continued with a normal renovation, but you chose to investigate, even when it got dangerous." "Curiosity has always been my weakness," Eliza smiled, "or my strength, depending on perspective." "It's definitely strength," Haley insisted. "You taught me that sometimes the most important discoveries happen when you're just trying to solve practical problems. You weren't looking for buried treasure. You were just trying to fix our house." This insight revealed her daughter's emotional maturity, her ability to extract life lessons from their extraordinary experience. Haley hadn't just absorbed historical facts. She had internalized the deeper meaning of their journey. Later that evening, unable to sleep despite the day's activities, Eliza found herself drawn to the discovery room. Museum-quality lighting illuminated the hidden panel that had started everything, the soft glow highlighting the craftsmanship that had kept Beaumont's secrets concealed for generations. "Couldn't sleep either." Sheriff Palmer's voice came from the doorway. Though no longer needed for security purposes, she had remained a frequent visitor and valued advisor to the historical center. "Just reflecting," Eliza admitted. "Sometimes I still can't believe all this started with peeling wallpaper." Palmer joined her, studying the hidden panel thoughtfully. "My grandmother used to say that homes contain the energies of everyone who's lived in them. Maybe Beaumont House was waiting for someone who would understand what it had to share." "That sounds suspiciously mystical for a practical sheriff," Eliza teased. "Law enforcement teaches you that there's often more connecting events than mere coincidence," Palmer replied with a smile. "The Davidson family owned every property around this house and discouraged buyers for years. Yet somehow you, a teacher with research skills, attention to detail, and extraordinary persistence, ended up purchasing it at exactly the right moment." "Financial desperation is hardly mystical intervention," Eliza pointed out. "Maybe not. But your response to that desperation might be something special. Many people facing your circumstances would have cut corners on renovation, covered problems rather than investigating them, chosen the easiest path rather than the most thorough." The observation resonated with Eliza's own reflections. Throughout the renovation process, even before discovering the hidden panel, she had approached each task with methodical care, refusing to take shortcuts despite financial limitations. That thoroughness, perhaps the teacher in her, had directly led to noticing the wallpaper discrepancy that others might have overlooked. "I've been offered a book deal," Eliza confided, sharing news she hadn't yet told anyone. Not just about the discovery itself, but about the journey from financial crisis to historical preservation. The publisher believes it might inspire others facing similar challenges. "You should absolutely do it," Palmer encouraged. "Your story demonstrates something people desperately need to believe, that setbacks can lead to unexpected opportunities, that financial hardship doesn't define your potential, that ordinary curiosity can lead to extraordinary discovery." The conversation continued as they wandered through the quiet exhibition halls, their footsteps echoing in spaces that had once been neglected rooms filled with outdated furniture and faded dreams. Each carefully designed display represented not just historical artifacts, but the countless hours of collaboration, research, and community engagement that had transformed both house and town. "The governor's office called today," Palmer mentioned, as they paused before the economic impact exhibit showing Harpersville's revitalization statistics. "They're considering Harpersville for the pilot program of the Rural Heritage Initiative. State funding for communities leveraging historical assets for economic development. Because of what we've done here, because you've demonstrated what's possible when historical preservation partners with community development. The Beaumont-Harrison Center isn't just a museum, it's a catalyst for sustainable growth. Local businesses are thriving, property values have stabilized, and young people like Haley are finding reasons to invest their futures in small-town life." This broader impact had been largely unintentional, a natural outgrowth of the discovery, rather than a planned objective. Yet it represented perhaps the most significant legacy of their adventure, extending beyond personal benefit or even historical significance to community transformation. As dawn approached, Eliza made her way to the house's Widow's Walk, a rooftop observation platform typical of Victorian architecture that had been meticulously restored during the renovation. From this elevation, she could see the entirety of Harpersville spread before her, streetlights still illuminating the pre-dawn darkness. Main Street's historic buildings now sported fresh paint and restored facades, with new businesses filling previously vacant storefronts. The courthouse square hosted a weekly farmers' market that drew visitors from surrounding counties. Even the once derelict mill at the edge of town was being converted into artist studios and galleries. All this from removing old wallpaper and having the courage to look beyond the surface. The eastern horizon began to lighten, promising another day of tours, research, and educational programming. In a few hours, visitors would again fill these spaces, connecting with history through the story of an ordinary woman who had made an extraordinary discovery. Their interest wasn't just in Confederate gold, but in the human elements of the narrative: courage, persistence, transformation, and the powerful reminder that history isn't just about famous figures and momentous events, but also about ordinary people making choices that ripple across generations. As sunlight gradually illuminated Beaumont House, Eliza reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The financial devastation that had forced her to purchase this neglected property had seemed like the end of her hopes for stability and security. Instead, it had become the foundation for something far more valuable than anything she could have planned or imagined. The hidden door behind peeling wallpaper had led not just to Confederate gold, but to personal reinvention, professional fulfillment, and community revitalization. The treasure, measured in gold coins, paled in comparison to the treasures of purpose, connection, and possibility that had emerged from its discovery. Hearing movement behind her, Eliza turned to find Haley emerging onto the widow's walk, hair tousled from sleep but eyes bright with purpose. "Morning, Mom. I had an idea for expanding the digital archive to include oral histories from longtime residents. Mrs. Harmon introduced me to several elders from the African American community whose grandparents worked in these homes during Reconstruction. Their stories add crucial perspective to our understanding of this period." Even half asleep, her daughter's mind worked with the passionate engagement of someone who had found her calling. This was perhaps the most precious treasure their adventure had yielded, watching Haley discover intellectual passion and purpose that would shape her future. "That's an excellent idea," Eliza approved. "Historical preservation isn't just about artifacts, it's about ensuring diverse voices and experiences are represented." As they stood together watching the town awaken below, Eliza placed an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "When we moved here, I promised you we'd build something stable despite our circumstances. I had no idea how that promise would unfold." "You did more than keep that promise," Haley replied with teenage eloquence. "You showed me that starting over doesn't mean settling for less. Sometimes it means discovering something better than you ever imagined." The wisdom in her daughter's observation struck Eliza forcefully. Their journey had indeed demonstrated that principle repeatedly. Financial hardship had led to purchasing Beaumont House. Renovation necessity had led to historical discovery. Danger had led to community alliance and institutional support. Each apparent setback had contained within it the seeds of unexpected opportunity. The day ahead would bring more visitors eager to hear their story, more researchers uncovering historical connections, more community members engaged in Harpersville's continuing revitalization. The rooms that had once felt oppressively outdated and neglected now hummed with purpose and significance, connecting past to present in ways that informed the future. As the town clock struck 7, officially beginning another day at the Beaumont Harrison Historical Center, Eliza embraced the journey that continued to unfold. The map she had discovered behind peeling wallpaper had led to Confederate gold, but the more valuable map had been the one she couldn't have recognized at the beginning, the pathway from desperation to purpose, from necessity to possibility, from simply surviving to genuinely thriving. That map, invisible but profoundly real, remained available to anyone with the courage to look beneath surface appearances, to investigate rather than ignore, to persist rather than retreat when faced with challenges. The treasure it led to couldn't be measured in gold coins or historical artifacts, but in transformed lives and revitalized communities. "Ready for another day of making history while preserving it?" Eliza asked as they turned toward the stairs. "Always," Haley replied, with the confidence of someone who had learned life's most valuable lesson, that our greatest limitations often contain our greatest opportunities, waiting just beneath the surface for someone brave enough to peel back the layers and discover what lies hidden within. As they descended to prepare for the day's first visitors, Eliza silently thanked the peeling wallpaper that had revealed not just a hidden door, but a pathway to possibilities beyond anything she could have designed or imagined. The house that financial desperation had forced her to purchase had become the foundation for something far more valuable than mere shelter, a place of purpose, meaning, and continual discovery that would enrich lives for generations to come. Sometimes the most valuable treasures are found not in hidden chambers filled with gold, but in the courage to look beyond apparent limitations, to investigate rather than ignore, and to recognize that what first appears as misfortune may actually be the doorway to extraordinary possibility. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.